this is a draft title of my thesis, and as I'm doing a kind of a doctoral education doctoral course, and I'm on a 5-year degree. So at the moment, I'm doing my literature review. So I've just started the phase of going through research and kind of finding out my interests and my themes. So I'm just going to talk to you a bit about where I stand in that, rather than talking to you about extensively about the literature that I've been through. So why this topic? It's a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. I belong to the specific group that I'm studying. I'm a British, North African / Arab Muslim woman, and I teach. The majority of students that I teach belong to that specific group too, and therefore I see them reflecting me and reflecting my childhood. The difference is that when I was growing up, and I grew up and I kind of went to the same school where I'm teaching now, so I'm very familiar with that environment, with the community. But when I was in that school, things were very different. We didn't hear much about Islamophobia. We had, sorry, something just fell next to me. We had a very kind of carefree childhood. We cared about education, and that was kind of the focus of our presence at school. There were some kind of sensitivities between different groups, obviously amongst the students, but it wasn't as kind of big as now. It wasn't as prominent as it is now. So my context definitely has helped me to reflect on the topic that I would like to do for my thesis. And throughout my teaching experience during these 13 years I've been at the same school, and I taught families, really. I've taught sisters and siblings, and some of them are extremely successful now, members of society. There are themes that keep kind of popping up, and that make me question quite a few aspects of my research topic. The most difficult thing really for me is my positionality. So I was trying to question myself about my identity, and I found that I don't have one particular identity. I have multiple identities that have shifted and changed throughout my childhood and throughout my adulthood. Sometimes I feel, so originally, just to put it into context, I'm from Morocco, but I came to the UK when I was 7, and I joined a French school. I was there for 5 years. Then I moved on to mainstream education at a state school, the one I'm currently teaching at. So throughout my childhood, I met different types of communities, and different types of Muslim communities in particular. And I couldn't really identify with any, because I come from a liberal background. I was raised in a certain way in Morocco, and I haven't seen many people, or many women, wearing headscarves in Morocco. It wasn't really happening when I was growing up. I only saw headscarves when I came to the UK. Apart from, obviously, there is a generation, like the older generation of some grandmothers used to wear it in Morocco when I was growing up, but it wasn't as prominent. It wasn't very popular within the young population. So for me, I was introduced to a new Muslim identity in the UK. It's very difficult to navigate in between these identities, and sometimes I belong more to one than the other. Obviously, there is definitely a British identity that is heavily present, but when I feel more British than Arab, or when I feel more Arab than Muslim, or when I feel more Muslim than North African, that is really complicated. And this made me reflect on the group that I'm going to be working with during my thesis. And I thought, if I'm finding it really hard to navigate through my multiple identities, that is definitely something that is going to resonate in my research too, and my data. So that made me think of something I need to be aware of. I do also come from a position of knowledge. I know a lot about the history of Muslim women and the power that the religion used to have at one particular era and how it changed. And therefore, I have a good degree of education. Therefore, I'm more informed that the subjects I'm going to be studying and working with. I'm also empowered, and I feel empowered, and we know that empowerment carries many interpretations and many kind of lights. But I'm empowered in my own way, and I feel empowered because I have the agency and the autonomy to do what I like, and to kind of lead my life the way I want to be. There is a difference of how I'm seen by external, so the kind of not friends particularly, but other people I encounter throughout my career, or just in various aspects of life. I'm sometimes referred to as a Western Muslim, or not an obvious Muslim. You're obviously not an obvious Muslim just because I'm not wearing a headscarf, and that's not just by Western people that I meet, but also by the Muslim community, or some members of the Muslim community. I'm also referred to as a modern Muslim, which is something I reject heavily, because that gives the impression that being Muslim is a kind of backward mentality, and it's not a civilized thing. I also kind of I have to be rotating between the teacher role and a researcher role. I obviously teach in that school, and I have a different relationship that I built during my many years at this school, but now I have to kind of navigate between the researcher and teacher positions, and I just need to kind of be aware of that. So there's lots of reflexivity. Reflexivity. Looking back at the starting point of Muslim women, something that is not really spoken about, and probably much of or many people in the Muslim community are not told about, is that Muslims or Muslim women were very, very strong at a particular point in history, starting from when the religion started. We have Khadija, who is the Prophet's first wife. She was a very, very successful businesswoman. She was, in fact, his boss, Haman's boss, and she was extremely active in the world of business. She used to travel on her camel to different tribes and regions, and do business dealings with various communities, etc. We had Nusayba bint Kab, who was a very strong warrior, and she used to fight with the Prophet in various battles. We have Fatima al-Fihri, who is a Tunisian woman who came from Tunisia, settled in Morocco with her father and sister. Her father was a merchant, and he left her all his wealth, and she opened the very first university in the world, which is still standing in Fez, Morocco, educating girls in the 800s. So girls had an education, and education was big a very long time ago. And there was no such thing as being banned from education or banned from work. We have Aisha, who is the last woman, or last wife of the Prophet, who was a very respected scholar as well, and she also fought in a battle. And we have Saida al-Hurra, who is one of the leaders who was fighting against battles against the enemies in the north of Morocco. I say enemies, but inverted commas. And then there is Sutaita al-Mahamali, who is one of many mathematicians who kind of discovered important aspects of maths. We also have various educators. I mean, the list is extremely long, but unfortunately, girls or Muslim girls don't really know much about this history because they are not taught much about this history. Unfortunately, what happened is that the city where the first university was established became an enclosed prison for women, the Harem Haven, and you can read a lot about that from sorry, a very famous Moroccan feminist called Fatima Menisi, who sadly passed away a few years ago. But she writes a lot about Islamic feminism and the power and gender equality. There has been a clear agenda of Muslim disempowerment, Muslim women disempowerment in the MENA politics in the MENA regions. It was visible through the education curriculum. Much of this has been hidden and erased from curriculums, and there was a push of the stay-at-home discourse and the fact that women are not allowed to work or only work when it's necessary, and that men should be providers and earners, breadwinners, and that women should kind of be family-oriented and looking after their children and being very submissive. Religious political parties have also played the card and have continued to push for this narrative, and it suited them pretty well. And there were punitive systems put in place for women who disobeyed these rules and did not fit into this new submissive image. And in some countries, punishment varied in severity. So the disempowerment of Muslim women has happened through patriarchy, through the state, and obviously kind of disseminated through society, and it became the norm. And all of a sudden, Muslim women were deprived of education. Education was not seen as a priority anymore. And even when women received, or girls received education, it was seen as very kind of the quality. It really lacked quality. Again, work, the priority shifted because the Muslim woman was meant to be at home now, looking after her children and obeying the husband. There's a clear pay inequality, but obviously this is happening in here as well. We're still fighting for pay inequality. The Muslim women have been ripped off their rights slowly, and the rights have not been equal between men and women, leading to obviously gender equality. And also there is a clear access or lack of access to information for these Muslim women and girls in these specific regions. So unfortunately, the conditions were made worse by the various wars that took place during these past decades. And when wars happen, then unfortunately, women and children take the worst hit. What's happening now with the Muslim Arab women and girls in terms of media and the curriculum? Over here in the West, unfortunately, the submissive image of the Muslim woman has been adapted or kind of embraced and kind of welcomed, not welcomed, but it's been, that's the one that's been kind of closely linked to Muslim Arab women. So the submissive, and it's very difficult to change it because once something is set, it's extremely difficult to change people's perception about it. So the curriculum, for example, has many, and I'm talking about the British curriculum, it has many aspects which point the finger at Muslim girls and kind of alienate them from the classroom, put them under the spotlight and embarrass them, making them, the other, in the classroom. So, for example, like things like FGM. FGM, I didn't even know existed until I saw it in the curriculum. I mean, I did. After that, I started reading into it, and I saw that it was I wouldn't say a common practice, but it was in some communities of kind of Egypt and Africa, and some parts of the Middle East. It's a ritual that is that kind of is done in certain tribes or communities, but it's not something that is done by the majority of the Muslim population. So therefore, why put it in the curriculum if it's only a very, very small minority? Then there was the prevent, which is it had the agenda of empowering Muslim women to combat terrorism. Why should Muslim women be in charge of combating terrorism? Why put that responsibility? That's also insinuating that Muslim women are kind of the source of terrorism, therefore they have to be, have the role to combat it. Again, we talk a lot about ISIS brides, forced marriages. I mean, how many times does it happen? I'm not saying it doesn't happen in certain communities, but it happens in certain communities, and it's not the norm. Then we have things being said by powerful people in the government, like a reference to Muslim women being like letterboxes, those who wear niqab. Again, why is somebody in the government discussing a women's dress? Why? So then the government's War on Terror initiative, and as a result of that in 2008, National Women's Advisory Group, NMWAG, was established, with the local authorities encouraged to find projects to empower Muslim women, again with the insinuating that Muslim women are weak and they need empowering. Muslim women dress has gained a lot of media, political and public attention, and now the public has an opinion about what Muslim women should be wearing and shouldn't be wearing, rather than giving them the choice, or not even discussing it, because it's not something that we need to have an opinion on, what other people wear. And successful Muslim women now are reported as being rare and as exceptional cases. I just saw yesterday an article about a hijabi firewoman, and she was on the BBC website as something a success story, but again, that makes it look like it is not the norm. And this kind of message is definitely getting to this generation of British Arab women, Muslim women in general. But I think why I feel very strongly about Muslim Arab women is because, or girls, is because they have been underrepresented in research. The reality is that Muslim women have a higher education and employment rates than Muslim men. And by 2050, there's going to be an estimated 3 billion Muslims worldwide, with the Europe's population rising to approximately 11.2%, and half of them identifying as Muslim women. So definitely there needs to be something done to stop kind of victimizing these women and alienating them as well from society and from the curriculum. Muslim women are currently excelling in all fields and industries, in music, writing, racing, politics, theatre, Olympics, art, medicine, the NASA. So it all needs to be portrayed as the norm rather than a rare and exception case. Alongside all of this kind of propaganda that's happening, there's been a lot of resistance. So there are strong women activist groups raising awareness in the MENA region and also in the UK. There's the voices of Muslim feminists are heard more and more, even though sadly Nawal Saadawi passed away last month as well, but she was a very active, well-respected woman who was fighting for gender equality. Sorry, let me just take this off. Sorry. I don't know what's happening there, but women are leading education and work, and in literature, it's not all, you know, there's a heavy resistance coming through in literature, and there's the niqab and the hijab emerge as a personal choice, and portraying a community belonging and an expression of devotion. There's been the Arab Spring as well, which kind of raised a lot of questions about leadership and about patriarchy, and women activists were very much a big part of that. But the Western media, including the British one, are still heavily holding on to the submissive scenario. So I really want to know in my research, where do this second generation North African and Arab Muslims girls feel about this? Where do they fit? How do they see themselves? Where do they position themselves in all of this? Are they do they feel close, or do they feel related or linked to that victim kind of identity, or are they part of this resistant movement that's going on? So when I was looking through the literature review, most of it was done on the South Asian community, and whilst I was reading it, it did not really resonate with me. There are many things that are cultural in the South Asian community that I don't really identify with, and I was thinking that probably it's the same for the Arabs, the Arab group that I'm going to be studying. Therefore, I thought we really need to dig into that a bit more and find out how these girls are identifying, how they're seeing empowerment, and how they see themselves as girls and women in terms of roles. So there's been many themes that I discovered during my reading, and there is definitely a theme of multiple identity, which heavily resonates with this group. So there is a fluidity of identity, so kind of experiences shaping who they are, and not particularly kind of feeling more kind of close to one identity than another. Then there is the hybridity of identities, which is sometimes feeling one and sometimes feeling the other. And that's the Peter's puts it nicely there. It's the cultural hybridity theory. It addresses the various hurdles of society that individuals confront. There's also the literature about the hybridity emerged in the post-colonial studies in the 1980s. And unfortunately, there is a heavy discourse of European Muslim minorities often being framed as the other. And there's a particular study that I've looked at, which resonated with me and which actually I found quite interesting. The Madrid Muslim Youth Study, and it studied young people of migrant origin, and most of them were Moroccan, of Moroccan origins. And these participants rejected exclusive identities in conscious construction of identity, which is exactly what where I fit. So I think that's why I warmed up to that particular study. There's also various kind of definitions of agency that came across, and for some Muslim girls, agency is having freedom to be devoted to God, and they find that they do have agency and nobody's taken away their agency. Also empowerment. It was found that teachings of Islam were seen as empowering to some women and girls, and Islamic feminists are leading this. However, they are still overshadowed in literature by the Western perspectives. which are still kind of assuming the idea of the victim, voiceless, manipulated Muslim girl who needs saving. In terms of gender, there are still the gender roles are still kind of being kind of discussed, and there's lots of disagreement about gender roles in communities, and that's particularly due to culture rather than religion, or maybe sometimes misinterpretation of religious texts. And there is a clear discourse of communities still pushing girls. Yes, they want their daughters to be educated, but education is kind of a journey that women go through until they find their match and get married and start their family. So the priorities shift as soon as the girl gets married. But what was really kind of worrying about me, about what I read, and concerning, is that the teacher perceptions were pretty much matching or comparable to the media, where the teachers had lower expectations a bit of Muslim girls, even though nationally girls perform better than boys. So I will be looking at, and I'm very I can't wait to start, and I haven't, but I'll be looking at my context, which is single-sex school with a high percentage of Muslim girls. Most are born in London, but they're originally from North Africa and the Middle East. These Muslim students are extremely inspirational. They have high aspirations. They are very strong-minded. They know exactly what they want. They're high achievers. They have those who left the school, went on and had very successful career paths. They are now active members of the community, and they have a voice. And I think they need to be heard, definitely, and there needs to be a shift from the current, the current scenario of the submissive, lacking of autonomy Muslim girls who need saving. We also have the Empower curriculum, which is a curriculum all based around gender equality, and which has been the core curriculum of the school for maybe about 7 or 8 years. And I think and this curriculum, this Empower curriculum, is for all 620 students of the school, and not just pointing at Muslim girls. But I really want to see how Muslim girls in particular are engaging with this Empower curriculum, and how what works and what doesn't, and what needs to be improved, and in general how they think, what they think of it. So the purpose of my, just finally, the purpose of my thesis would be to give this underrepresented group a voice. To finally, we're finally going to be recognised on the census, and I've looked at the census results, but they still haven't come out. It's, the Arabs have been put in the census for the first time. So it'll be very, very interesting to see the numbers. But also I want there to be more representation in the research. And I also want to make this Empower curriculum accessible to all Muslim students, not just in our particular school, but maybe kind of take it further. And I want to remove the alienation of Muslim girls in the curriculum. So thank you so much for listening. I kind of tried to cover my journey through this. I'm just going to stop sharing. I tried to cover my journey through this without kind of, I didn't go too much into detail of the literature, obviously, but I wanted it to be my perceptions rather than just kind of regurgitating what I found in the research. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Najwa. It's so fascinating. I mean, thank you for speaking about your context and positionality first. The topic of positionality is very significant for me. I'll tell you, when I started my PhD, I was challenged on my positionality of being an Indian national, working on India-Pakistan relations. I was challenged on my positionality when I was writing also. Sometimes I was so critical of Pakistan, I was not critical of India. So I understand. And also when I was interacting with the participant, I also, again, reflected back on my positionality. So thank you for speaking about the positionality. It was so important to, it's so important to start talking about positionality and talking about yourself in the research process. That really was very interesting to hear from you.
Thank you.
I also completely agree with you on the disempowerment of Muslim women. We found some data in one of my projects at UCL where we collected in Tower Hamlets, in Luton and in Birmingham. And some of the data also speak to the themes that you presented, such as the lack of access to information. And when we were hosting this roundtable conference with the parliamentarians, we also found that some women didn't even receive the public messages because there was lack of support for English language, also not enough funds for ESOL as well. So that was very interesting as well. It's something to speak to our data as well. The other thing I like about the good case study, when you talk about the women voices in the labor market, again, we had collected a lot of data where these women voices talks about the other layer of issues when they're in the labor market. And some talks about the issues at the awarding stage in higher education institution as well. I would also like to mention, I was reading an article on Dalit women recently who have started writing autobiographies to talk about their context and their collective identity. If you want, I can send you the article. Yeah. And it's so interesting that it's coming as a rememorization of their experience as a Dalit and low-caste women, and how it's significant sometimes to write their history by themselves rather than we decentering their narratives. So autobiographies, testimonials, memoirs have also come out very nicely in terms of giving voice or narratives or bringing out those narratives from women experiences. I really like your narratives of agency, empowerment, and gender. And I hope that you could, you can bring this curriculum out and empower everyone.
Hopefully, I hope so too.
Should we take some questions, Kusha? Should we open?
Yeah. So sorry, I was just so fascinated with your topic. So can we have questions, please?
Thank you, Kusha. Thank you.
Can I just say, can I just
please?
Oh. Hi, Najwa.
Hello.
Thank you for your presentation. I think it's great that you talk about Muslim feminists, because a lot of the narrative is always around sort of white feminism, and this idea that feminism is only in a sort of northern hemisphere.
Yes.
White women, and actually, as you say, there are lots of feminists all over the world, and so feminism is actually a transnational phenomenon, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
I think it's very, very important that you talk about that, and also counteracting this narrative around disempowered Muslim women. I think it's very interesting, and I really look forward to reading your next step when you collect the data. And that, I think that would be really fascinating. So
yes,
hopefully one presentation for us in the future.
Thank you. I really look forward to starting. Obviously, the data collection is still a bit far, not too far because time goes really quickly. But I know there'll be many topics that I'll kind of that will come out from that. But I'm just slightly worried that the lockdown effect are also going to have an impact on the perceptions, and so it will be a bit of a challenge for me to pick out what has been an effect of lockdown in terms of mental health and mental health, the shifts and shifts in attitudes, and what's kind of to do with empowerment and disempowerment and the identity in general. So
yeah, and I have a question for you actually.
Yes.
About EM, because you mentioned how FGM is presented, and I'm asking that because I did some data collection with teachers
Yes.
around FGM, and you mentioned that it is presented as a Muslim problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not, is it? FGM is a cultural practice that happens.
It's absolutely, but it's very hard to eliminate culture from religion and vice versa, and especially for girls who are 14, 15. They can't really tell the difference. So when we're talking about these practices and we say the region where they're likely to happen, then they kind of associate it to Muslim girls. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but we were told to look out for signs of girls when they go abroad during the summer to their family and country of origin. Teachers need to be aware of changes of attitude, changes of character when they come back, because that might be a sign of FGM. In fact, anything could have happened during the summer break. They might have lost a family member or things like that. But it was a particular group that it was targeting, particularly the Somali community. And I think maybe because at the time there were many reports maybe from the Somali community that it was happening. But again, even if it was just in that particular community, it doesn't represent all the Muslim communities. The Muslim communities not being a homogenous group, obviously, but they are seen as a homogenous group. And if something is happening in one community or in one culture, it's kind of laid out as is happening as a norm in general.
Because also FGM happens in Christian communities as well, so it's
yes,
not
yes, absolutely. I know it happens in Africa and some Christian African countries too, but it's not really spoken about that much.
Yeah. No, it's a very important point. Thank you for raising that, Najwa. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Any questions? Oh, there's one here. There's one in the chat from Eva. Thank you for this inspirational presentation. The personal reflection of positionality made it very lively. Thank you. I would be interested what your understanding and use of the concept of empowerment is. I heard various connotations, a critical one, why there is a need to empower this target group in the media. This made me think of decolonial perspectives of concepts such as development and in particular participation. And origins and use of these concepts. Well, I was looking at the origin of the word empower, and it actually means to authorize and to give permission. And I think it was something used from the Pope. I'm not sure of the exact years, but it was given permission. So the fact that you're given permission, it puts you in a position of higher authority. And I think it kept that meaning. So the Western or how we use empowerment now is actually very, very similar to that. So we are in a position of a higher status, and we are given authority, or we're actually given power to others. So that is the kind of understanding in general of empowerment in literature, but obviously there are many other definitions. But it was interesting to see what the Muslim girls in literature thought about empowerment, because some of them had a different understanding of empowerment, and their understanding of empowerment was given to them by their religion. And the autonomy that their religion has given them, and the equality that the Quran gives them, and the kind of new status of women in the Quran compared to the other religions. So they saw the Quran as being an empowering text for them. So definitely there is a difference there. But that's why it's very important to, I will be making that clear once I start writing up my thesis, what exactly, which interpretations of empowerment I will be using throughout my research.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm glad that you conceptualize or considered it this way, because in between I just heard very different connotations within the concept, and I don't know much about empowerment, but I looked into participation and became very critical during my PhD, because, as you said, if we let participate people, in a way there is a hierarchy in who we let to participate and so on, and there is a very critical deconstruction of, for example, the concept of participation, and within that, empowerment from the decolonial perspective. So
yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
That's such a great thought, question, Eva, because also we're looking at development, these very dominant international development discourses, where empowerment is the key word, isn't it? Because you're doing the very act of development is to empower people, isn't it? So thinking of power in that way, thinking of power as outside, is something that we often talk about. And so I really take heart in the references that you've sort of mentioned in the presentation, Najwa, and what, like Juliana was saying as well, the references to the feminist and the post-colonial and the decolonial studies, and how thinking about these concepts differently. So going beyond the very established understandings of agency and empowerment and power, and then what do these frameworks of post-colonial and feminist literature and studies sort of add to working with these underrepresented groups. So I think it was such an excellent and powerful presentation. Thank you for that. I think Suleiman had a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Najwa. It was very intellectually stimulating, and as you could see last week, it's very close to my heart, this topic. Yeah, in general, yeah, just as a comment, I think it also matters from what, again, to the issue of positionality, who is conceptualizing empowerment. Will it be the same if, for example, a Western organization or individual stands and talk about empowerment of the Southern women or so-called third world women? Will it have the same connotation from a third world, so-called third world women talking about the empowerment within the third world women? I think that's also important, how who is talking about empowerment. Is it a sort of export dimension of empowerment, or evolving dimension of empowerment within communities, within women, within men even? And also, I just wanted to point out to the issue of the policies, the link with, for example, prevent the issues of dialogue or conversations, or words that politicians use as letterbox and targeting specifically Muslim women. It has a sort of continuation to the history. It's not decontextualized in a way. It has, just as an example, in terms of the recent burqa or 2004 burqa or veil ban in France, that goes back to the area of the times of imperialism, where Algerian women were seen, specifically the one wearing hijab, were seen as backwarded, uneducated, and in the need of that rescue and civilization. That's why there was a civilizing mission to focus on that. I mean, this is not very recent. It's a continuation, but in different contexts and different discourses. And prevent, of course, is a very a strong tool for that continuation. Just very specifically in terms of your methodology, I just wanted to know Will it be one single sex school that you mentioned? And will you target the stakeholders in that school and teachers, or it will be only students?
I'll just answer your question, your final question first. Yes, I'm going to do it as a case study in my particular school. And I'll be talking to the teachers and also to the parents. Yes, it will be kind of more all stakeholders involved, and also the policy makers in the school, etc. In terms of the France subject, and I think that it kind of really makes my blood boil, because I've had a few battles on social media about this topic. People telling me that I'm letting Muslim women down by not standing up and not promoting the ban of the hijab. And I said, well, if we're talking about freedom, then freedom needs to be for all, and freedom needs to be from all aspects. People need to be free to wear what they like. And if they don't want to wear a scarf, they don't have to. And if they want to wear one, then you should not stop them, because it's within their right. And also, why is it always women who are targeted? I mean, the headscarf is part of, is a symbol of religion, but so is the beard for men. So why are you not making men shave off their beards if you are combating signs of religion? So again, it's always women feeling, women are always the victims in society, unfortunately. And then going back to your first point about empowerment, there will be different kind of interpretations and stands of empowerment, depending on who's doing the research. And I think it's important for as many, for people like me, who are within the community, and who can possibly access the community kind of more freely, and who understands the community a bit more, to do research. And I think people like me should be doing lots of research to diversify the term empowerment and bring in the new kind of stance from a Muslim woman point of view.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's brilliant. I mean, so much to take away from. Any other questions, comment, reflections?
Absolutely, yes. Women's bodies are definitely a battleground, and we're still debating about what Muslim women should be wearing and what they shouldn't be wearing. In 2021, we're still debating about that. Yeah.
I saw that on your Twitter. I saw it on your Twitter, Najwa, when I was tweeting. I was like, this is amazing. Like, there was so much in there. And I liked how you were talking about all these, how dress is strategically recruited to marginalize one group. And while you won't talk about the beard, because
because that's going to open a can of worms, then that will make other men who are not Muslim have to shave their beards. And that's against human rights.
Yeah.
Just one comment on the beard. The data we collected, we found some narratives on the issue of beard and the skin color.
Okay.
Some men in the UK from Muslim backgrounds are facing issues on the matter of beard and color.
Because because they're choosing not to have a beard?
They're choosing to have a beard so that they do not get to the good jobs, the high skilled jobs. So they end up in the low skilled jobs.
Right.
And if they are lighter skin, they would get a high skilled job. But if they belong to a darker skin shade, they would get a low skilled job. So I wasn't sure. When I was dealing with it, I found different layers of issues with men as well in the UK. So just go forward. Utsa, please.
Utsa, yeah. Welcome, Utsa. Please unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
This is fascinating. Thank you very much. It sounds like a really exciting project.
Thank you.
So my query was regarding, I was wondering, both in your reading of the literature and when you will pursue your fieldwork, are you also thinking of social class as a factor. So is the school, I'm presuming the school you're talking about is a state school.
It's a state school, yes.
And I don't know what the kind of class composition is, because as you're aware, a lot of sociology of education literature has an emphasis on the class as a very important marker of the educational success and how the students are treated inside the school and so on. I was wondering if you did notice any important intersections between gender, religion, and class in that context. It might not be relevant yet.
I think when I first started thinking about this thesis, I was extremely excited, and I thought I wanted to study everything and all aspects and all sections. But then when you come to the real world, and you think, okay, I probably need to concentrate on a few and just kind of choose, 2 or 3 themes. I can't do it all. The school where I'm at the moment has a high percentage of free school meals. So they'll all be kind of the same class. There are a few middle class, but they're the minority. But also class is a very complicated thing to explore with people from minorities, because they might be a certain class here in the UK, but back home they'll have a completely different class. So again, that's going into exploring their identity in terms of class, and that might be very different, and that might have different interpretations. So yes, it might come. I might come across class in the data that I'm going to be exploring, but I don't think I'm going to be dwelling more on that.
That could change, Najwa. I feel that might
change. And if it's something that keeps popping up a lot, then obviously I will probably do it.
It's the wonders of the PhD, isn't it? Like you never know what you're going to find and what's going to happen. No, thanks, Utsa. That was a great question.
Any other question? We've got some time for one last question or comment or reflection, or maybe you want to share something from your own PhD on your positionality or reflexivity.
Maybe out of curiosity, I could ask a follow-up question, Najwa. Based on your own positionality, do you think that this sort of fluidity or hybridity in Arab Muslim is shifting per generation, or it's consistent in a way? Of course it's not consistent, but is it shifting from one generation to another, so becoming more British than Arab, or no, it's in between? It remains in a way that dulls identity.
Yeah, I think there's a definite, if I'm talking from personal experience, there is definitely a shift from when I was a student in that school to the students I'm teaching now. When I was a student, I felt like my community or my friends at the school, they identified as Arabs, and they refused the British identity. When somebody says, "Oh, but you're British," they say, "No, I'm not. I'm Arab." And I think it may be because kind of identity or Arab identity was celebrated then, and they felt kind of belonging as a group because they were all together and they interacted together. So they kind of that new identity, or that identity was reinforced positively, I think. Now it's mixed, I think, the students that I'm talking to, because kind of ethnicities have mixed as well. So now there's more kind of half Arab, half British, from one Arab parent and one kind of white English parent, or even Colombian, or so there's a lot of mix now compared to when I was a student. And I think the British identity features a bit more now, And maybe because they're more comfortable with being both, and they understand a bit more about the fact that you can be one and the other, you can be one or the other, you can be both. And because maybe we talk a lot about diversity and identity, and they're just much more comfortable talking about it and kind of feeling a certain way, not being kind of alienated.
That's such a good point, Najwa. And it's ambivalence, isn't it? When we look at post-colonial studies, there's the strategy of ambivalence. You can be one and the other.
Yeah.
And that works. That's a strategy for subversion and resistance as well. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think that's
and I think for me personally, that's part of my own resistance. When people ask me, where are you from? I say I'm British, because you're assuming that I'm not. Absolutely. So I have to say I'm British.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm feeling the person who's talking to me is friendly and is just asking me in a friendly, curious way, of course I say I'm British, but I'm originally from Morocco. I'm Arab, so it all depends. Identity is a very complicated aspect.
But thank you, Najwa. It was really brilliant. I mean, very inspiring and very interesting presentation. And thank you, Gunjit, for letting me share this session.